Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Mrs. Tao here, back today. Thank you so much for all those who have subscribed to my channel. Thank you for always watching and giving the videos a thumbs up. Today we are talking about property, one of my favorite topics. Specifically on property, I want us to start thinking about what is the true cost of property. Basically, these are the costs that we should all be aware of before we sign that contract to buy property. Remember, planning is very, very important. So before you go and make that offer and buy that property, you need to plan ahead, and planning involves understanding each and every cost that you'll be required to pay or may be required to pay. So I'm going to break it down into two types of costs. So the first costs are the upfront costs. So these are the costs that you will have to pay as you buy the property upfront. And then the second type of costs are the ones that you have to pay on a monthly basis. So let's start discussing the upfront costs. The most important cost is the purchase price. This is the price of the property that you'll be buying. This is the advertised price of the property that you'll be buying. What is important to consider here is your affordability. You have to go and actually do an affordability test at a bank prior to actually looking for the property. I suggest that, so by the time you're going online and looking at properties to buy, you have an estimate of how much you can afford to search for the properties for. Secondly, the affordability test will help you in assessing how much will you have to pay out of your own pocket. By this I mean the bank might say, okay, we approve you for a property of R1 million, for example. However, we will need you to have a deposit of 20% and you'll only be able to finance the 80%. So that means that you will have to have 200,000 out of your own pocket to pay the bank for the deposit, and then the bank will be able to give you a bond for the remainder of the amount. So obviously then you have to plan ahead and make sure that you have that sum of money to pay as a deposit. So it's very, very important to understand what is the purchase price that I can afford. Of this purchase price, do I need to pay for a deposit or not? Sometimes the bank is able to give you 100% of the purchase price, but if you are in a position where you can pay for a deposit, this is highly recommended because obviously it's going to help you in terms of decreasing your monthly installments that you pay in the future for the 20 years ahead, which is the normal bond period. Just another advice in terms of the purchase price quotations from the bank, I'd always advise that you go to the main big banks, go to all of them and just compare each quotation, and don't just go to your main banker, and also try and negotiate. So just because this bank is giving you the lowest percentage, which is X percent, it doesn't mean accept that. Try see if you can lower it. So always be willing to have a conversation with the banker and see if you can lower it. Or if you're not happy, for example, with, let's say, the purchase price that they are approving you for, you can always ask the banker, what can you do in the next few months to improve your finances so that you have higher chances of getting a higher approval amount. So it's very important, guys, for you to be able to have a conversation. So start this process early, do your research, go to the bank, have conversations and compare, and then prepare for the deposit should you need to pay it or want to pay it. The second type of cost that you have to pay upfront is the transfer fee. So this applies when you're buying a property that already belongs to someone. So if you're buying a property that is in a new development or just a newly built property, there is no transfer fee because that property is not registered under anyone's name yet, right? But if you're buying a property, for instance, from myself, then you'll be liable for the transfer fees. So the transfer fees are the fees that a transfer lawyer will quote you on that transaction. The transfer lawyer will give you an invoice that has a total amount that you have to pay for the transfer fees. But for your understanding, it is important to know that the transfer fee invoice will be made out of two types of costs. The first one is the service fee, which you're paying the lawyer for their service of transferring the property from the previous owner's name. The second fee is the transfer duty. So in South Africa, if you're buying a property which is less than R1,000,000, there's no transfer duty. So the invoice will only have the service fees for the lawyer. However, if you're buying a property that costs more than R1,000,000, there will be transfer duties. Transfer duties are calculated depending on how much the property you're buying, according to the stipulations by the South African government. But you must just know that if your property is more than R1,000,000 in terms of the purchase price, there will be transfer duties attracted to it. Then the third type of upfront cost is the registration cost. So the registration cost is now whereby the lawyers register the property in your name. Remember, they first had to transfer it from the previous owner's name. Now they're going to register it into your name. So even in this instance, the lawyers are going to send you an invoice with the registration costs. In this instance, this will just mainly be for their services to have your name registered at the deeds office as the owner of the property. So this is actually one that you can budget for, because the invoice is just their services, and you'll find a rough estimate of, in South Africa it's usually around 20 to 30,000 rand. That's the service fee that you pay for registration. I know that very well in Joburg. If you budget around that band, you should be fine. It's not really dependent on the price of property at all. It's just for their service to say, okay, we're registering this at the deeds office for you. So just to recap, 3 types of upfront costs that you always pay when buying a property: your purchase price, which might also entail you paying a deposit should you need or want to. Secondly, your transfer costs, which entails you paying the lawyers to transfer the property and paying for transfer duties where applicable. And B, sometimes you might not have transfer duties where the property is less than R1,000,000. And thirdly, your third upfront cost is the registration cost, which is you paying the lawyers to register the new property into your name at the deeds office. So guys, it's all nice and well to think about these upfront costs and actually budget for them. What is also important is for you to consider your affordability in terms of from month to month. Once I've paid for the monthly bond amount that I'll have to pay for the bank going forward, what are the other costs related to the property that I need to make sure that I can afford? So the first month-to-month cost that I'll touch on is the home insurance. So home insurance is important because if you're getting a bond from one of the banks in South Africa, they will insist that you have home insurance. If you're buying a standalone property, meaning a property that is not in a complex, you will have to go and shop around for your own insurance that you pay on a month-to-month basis for your home. However, if you're going to stay in a complex, you will not have to pay for that one separately. While we're talking about complex, the second type of cost that is month to month that you have to budget for is your levies. So if you stay in a complex, every month you're going to get an invoice for your levies. So this levy statement actually includes your home insurance. So as I said, if you're not staying in a complex, you have to pay for your own home insurance. But if you stay in a complex, you're going to get an invoice at the end of each and every month from the body corporate of that complex, giving you a total amount that you have to pay for levies. This invoice will include home insurance, and it will include other services that they offer you at the complex, such as security at the gate, the fees for the people who come every week to do the gardening. So all of these costs will be included in your monthly levy fees. So that's the second type of costs that you must be prepared for on a month-to-month basis. Thirdly, you must be prepared to pay government rates. Government rates apply to everyone, whether you're staying in a complex or in a stand-alone unit. Government will calculate based on the value of your property, firstly, and based on the area that you stay in, they're going to calculate a monthly amount that you have to pay them for government rates. You must be aware that some areas are very expensive because obviously the properties in those areas will be valued very high. So you must always try get an estimate beforehand of the type of area you're staying in, how much are the rates. So what are these rates really for? So these rates are basically for all the government services that you get that have to do with your property. For instance, they will collect refuse bags on a weekly basis at your place. They're charging you for such services. They're charging you for the maintenance of your street and the cleaning of your streets, the public street that is. Yeah, so such costs, that's what we're actually paying for when we pay government rate. And then another cost, which is the fourth month-to-month cost that you definitely incur, it is your water and your electricity. So obviously this will be dependent on your usage, whether you have a big or a small family, but you must always know that every single month you have to pay for water and electricity. And then the fifth type of monthly cost that you have to be prepared for is maintenance. So obviously owning a property now is different from you leasing a property, in the sense that if you stay in your new place and the geyser bursts, the cost to repair that is actually on you. So those are costs that you cannot foresee easily, as it can happen at any period of time, which is why it is important for you to always make sure that you have excess savings that are available should you need to repair anything in the house, because it is your responsibility now as a homeowner. And lastly, if you're buying a property and you know that actually you would want to give it a facelift or renovate it slightly in future, this is something that you should also consider, and also just plan around how you're gonna save for it. So yes guys, those are the costs that you should always have in mind when buying a property. Think about the upfront cost, purchase price, registration, transfer fees. Think about the monthly cost that you incur, the home insurance, the levies, the government rates, the water and electricity, and then also think about ongoing costs or future costs that you might have relating to the property. In closing this video, I just want to emphasize one thing. Before jumping and wanting to buy the property, consider all these costs, do your homework, check your budget, know how much you can afford. So yes guys, happy shopping, happy researching, and just take your time and plan proper. A property is a 20-year commitment. It can be shorter if you want it to be, but it's a long commitment. You don't want to decide quick and then end up having all of these costs that you were not prepared for. Thank you so much guys for watching once more. I hope this was super helpful, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. If you have subscribed, do share this video with anyone else that you think it might help. Love you guys. Bye.